Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Friday, April 17th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. With the 2020 NFL Draft on the clock, we thought we'd turn back the clock and recall what the thinking was heading into the 2017 Draft, the one where the Chiefs selected Patrick Mahomes. We know how the story ends, or at least where it stands right now. The Chiefs traded up to select Mahomes, a pick that wasn't universally applauded in football circles. Mahomes sits out a season, becomes a starter in 2018, wins the league's MVP award, and then guides the Chiefs to a Super Bowl victory in his third NFL season. None of that could have been envisioned a week before the draft in 2017. So we went back to remember what the conversation was about the Chiefs draft that year. This stuff lives on in Facebook Live archive, so I went to the Wayback Machine and pulled a Facebook Live that the Star recorded a week before the draft. This one involves Terez Paylor. He was our Chiefs beat writer then, who now does a wonderful job as a national NFL writer for Yahoo Sports. Check out his podcast called the Yahoo Sports NFL Podcast with Charles Robinson and Terez Paylor. Terez guided our coverage then. Also on that Facebook Live are Star columnists Sam Mellinger, Vahe, Gregorian, and me. Keep in mind that when this was recorded, there was no guarantee the Chiefs were going to select a quarterback. Alex Smith was the starter. The Chiefs had been in the playoffs in 3 of his 4 seasons in Kansas City. In fact, I found a story that compiled more than 100 mock drafts for that season, and the consensus pick for the Chiefs at number 27, you remember, was Florida linebacker Jarrad Davis. Only a handful of them had them taking Mahomes, and less than a quarter had the Chiefs selecting a quarterback. So as far as speculation was concerned, the notion that the Chiefs would even take a quarterback was far from given. Our little crew seemed to think the Chiefs were leaning quarterback. You're going to hear a few things on this podcast. First, the Facebook Live with Terez, Vahe, Sam, and me about a week before the draft. And then you'll hear from Andy Reid and then General Manager John Dorsey on the night the Chiefs selected Mahomes. I found it interesting to go back and hear what they had to say about what they saw in their first pick that year. After a break, the A-Team guys got back together earlier this week to relive that week in Chiefs history. Terez, Vahe, Sam, and me got to talking about what we remember about those days leading up to the draft and the Mahomes selection. We had a lot of fun reminiscing. Okay, so let's get started with the part about our pre-draft conversation in 2017.
Especially if you take a quarterback in this draft and you're able to live with him for at least a year before you make a decision on whether you play him, I think it makes a lot of sense to take the guy with the higher ceiling, because before you have to commit to him with actual snaps and actual games, you can have a little bit better idea of whether he can play for you.
What I'll tell you is that I think Peterman of those quarterbacks is the one guy that could be your backup this year.
Yeah. That's probably
closest to being the number 2 guy.
Yeah.
If you don't believe in Tyler Bray,
I agree with that.
You know, there's some good stuff there with him.
But
it's sort of more of a question for you, Terez. What do you see as the difference between you're choosing your favorite quarterback out of this group? What's the difference between what your criteria is and what the Chiefs' criteria is, and who's right?
I care about finding Pro Bowls. Like if I'm gonna draft a quarterback, I'm gunning for top 5 quarterback. I'm gunning for, I'm shooting for the moon, because if I can hit it, my job's safe for 10 years, right? That's what I'm looking for.
And is that how you assume they think?
I don't know. I think Andy Reid wants someone that's going to do what he tells him to do, which makes me a little concerned about Mahomes. But I will say this: Patrick Mahomes is reckless with the football, but the NFL can humble you. The NFL will humble you. You attempt that, it's not just Andy Reid getting on you. It's your offensive lineman. It's Travis Kelce. It's Jeremy Maclin saying, "What the F are you doing? Don't do that again." And I think Mahomes is pliable enough to be reeled in.
Yeah, and I also want to say this about Pat Mahomes, and I'm speculating a little bit here, but his sort of wild decision-making, that may be what he's coached to do. Like, Cliff Kingsbury wants to sling it around a little bit, Like, I think Kingsbury absolutely seems like a coach who's okay with a mistake if later you make 2 good plays.
Right.
And so maybe he's like, just responding to the coaching.
And also, like, what it takes to win an NFL playoff game against a good team?
No.
Guts.
Nobody here who's watching.
Tell us, Uncle Terez.
Well, it's not like I would know. I'm a Lions fan, for God's sake. My team's won one playoff game. It's not like I know, but it takes guts. It takes what Marcus Peters talks about. Let him hang, young blood. Let him hang. You got to have that, You got to let it. I think as Patrick Mahomes grows as a player, as long as he's nurtured and not thrown into the fire, boy, 2 years as an apprentice, that'd be pretty tempting to me, right? Can you imagine 2 years with Pat Mahomes as an apprentice? Not even 1, 2.
Yeah.
You give him 2, that's, hey, man, he'll have his stuff down, no real pressure, I'd like
All
it.
right, two thoughts on that. First, I'm wondering aloud here. What's the value of being the son of a former Major League Baseball player, having the sort of the athletic pedigree and having grown up with a dad who was a professional athlete? But more importantly, what would the Chiefs have to do in the draft to put themselves in a position to get Mahomes?
It's tough.
Because
Good question.
he ain't gonna be there at 27.
I think we are increasingly seeing it's going to be tough for him to be there. You never really know about this time of year. To get into the teams, you might have to give up top 100 picks. I don't know if Dorsey wants to do that. I don't know if he likes that.
So that was us 3 years ago. Okay, so the draft happens, and I can remember being at the Chiefs facility that night in another room when the alert came that the Chiefs were on the clock. They had moved up from number 27 to number 10 in the draft order, and that obviously meant picking a quarterback. I thought they were going to go with Clemson's Deshaun Watson. Wrong. Here's Andy Reid and John Dorsey on what they liked about Mahomes, the Texas Tech gunslinger, and what they envisioned for him with the Chiefs.
Patrick Mahomes with our first pick, and had an opportunity to move up for him. And we felt that we had a good football player there, obviously. Dorsey will be following me here, and he'll tell you the same thing, that when he sees a good player that he likes, he's going to attack it and go get him. And so that's what he felt about Patrick, and I thought he did a great job with it. And it falls into the quarterback position. Right now, Patrick's not absolutely ready to play. He's got some work to do, but he's coming into a great room. He gets an opportunity to learn from Alex Smith, which will be a phenomenal experience for him, and learn the offense. And so we have to be patient with him. Definitely not a finished product right now, but he has tremendous upside, and we think he'll fit into this offense very well. He's a good person. He's intelligent. He's got great skill, and I just think he'll be a great Kansas City Chief when it's all said and done. With that, time's yours. Yeah, we just we think they're both really good football players. We just thought with what we do that Mahomes would fit in well. We had all the guys in, all the quarterbacks came in. Had an opportunity to spend 6 hours with each guy. I mean, it was a great experience to have a chance to meet all the guys. Both those young men are tremendous young men. We thought with what we do, Mahomes would fit in the best. Yeah, well, I think the things that he does well, it wasn't just one play, but the things that he does well is first of all, he's smart. That helps because that room, Alex has taken this thing to another level. So his intelligence is is a plus, and then his ability to move in the pocket. Very seldom do you have a perfect pocket that you're sitting in the National Football League. So that all looks good when you're at the combine and all that, but what's real is you've got to be able to move and still throw with velocity. And we thought he did that well. And he's got tremendous vision and tremendous upside. So I just, I think it's a real nice pick for us. Well, I've probably been fortunate to have been around the best gunslinger ever. So with Brett Favre. So But I'm not into comparisons. But you throw the word gunslinger out, you kind of think of that guy. And they're different. They're different players. Obviously, Brett's a Hall of Fame player. This kid has got a long way to go before that. And but I think when you have an opportunity to talk to them and be around them, you'll feel a certain energy. And then when you see him practice, you're going to see a certain intensity that you like. And you'll understand it better once once you have that opportunity.
As you all well know, we had taken Patrick Mahomes, with our first pick in the draft, or the first pick. And when you do a move like this, you have to do it with everybody's was on board with this one from the very beginning, all the way back from when we evaluated him back in September, October. The reigning consensus was he's got unbelievable talent. He's got the skill set to be one of those truly great players. And I think sometimes when you make an aggressive move like that, that's why you do it, because these players, very few, they don't come by too often, so you have to take a shot at it, and that's kind of what we did.
John, obviously you like him because he gave up a lot to get him. But
Yeah.
in the bigger picture, do you need to address this year the quarterback situation long term?
Well, I think what you're doing is you're building for the future of the organization. I think that's important. And we did that. And I think from a compensation standpoint, I don't think it was a lot. Because at the end of this thing, I really think he's going to be a really good player. He's in a perfect situation. He can sit back, he can learn, he can develop, and then he's got the toolage of some really good coaches. And, I couldn't be more excited.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Well, I'm not even going to try to duplicate Terez's introduction from previous editions of Facebook Live, and I mean that thing should be dropped in the time capsule and never to be open for 100 years. But let me tell you how good it feels to have the A-team back together for this special edition with Terez Paylor, Vahe Gregorian, Sam Mellinger, and we are here to talk, to relive a moment in time, actually a few days that comprise a moment in time when a week or so before the 2017 draft, we were all wondering what the Chiefs were going to do. And I wanted to ask each of you guys what you remember about that moment. I'll tell you what, Vahe, we'll start with you and then just go down the line because that's how you appear on my screen. We know what happened, and we'll talk more about what happened, but what did we think was going to happen in 2017 as we approached the draft?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I did then and forever will bask in the collective glow, or whatever, the reflective glow of the original A-team format. I still keep that A-team mock-up that Jeff Patterson did on my Facebook sports columnist page. It's just always a great thing to have the gang back together. Those days were really interesting because I thought Terez and Sam were at a particular sort of peak intensity about that draft. And I know that there were a lot of things that were kind of in flux and that we were still wondering about, but some real basic premises that those two in particular had about what was to come, I think really stood out to me as we reviewed that. And I think that I really wanted to know, and I know we have a clip with this, a little bit about how Terez understood his own thinking might be aligning with the Chiefs' thinking. And I think there was just a lot of prescient stuff in what those guys had to say.
I agree. Look, Sam, I thought you and Terez were really kind of in sync on this and on the same page when it came to the Chiefs looking at a quarterback pretty strongly at a quarterback. That year, there were several top prospects: Deshaun Watson, Mitch Trubisky, Deshaun Kaiser was also in the mix. But I just remember hearing you guys sitting on a panel with you guys talking about Patrick Mahomes in a way that I wasn't hearing anybody else talking about Mahomes. I know that Terez had studied a lot of tape, and you looked at some tape as well. This was before the draft. What was it about what you saw then that had this great appeal to you?
I just thought he was breathtaking in a lot of ways. But he played the position like few others that I can, maybe no others that I can imagine. And, some of it looks a little bit goofy, right? With a defense that's given up 40 or 50 points a game or whatever it is. That Oklahoma game, for instance, was a little bit comical where he's throwing 80-some passes or whatever. But I thought the more that you watched him, the more that other stuff started to shed a little bit. And you saw, he made some weird decisions and his footwork was a complete disaster. But, once you looked at the mistakes, like the interceptions, you could see what he was trying to do. And, when you watch games like that bowl game against LSU, some certain moments like that where the two rosters have nothing in common, of the opponents. Like Texas Tech is just way outmanned, but they're at least competing and they're in it because this freak show quarterback is doing it. It's just the hurdle to get over was that there just hadn't been anybody like him before. And, the air raid hadn't produced any NFL quarterbacks. That was a big thing. He didn't win. That was a thing that was hung on him a little bit. But God, just when you watch just the pure talent, it was breathtaking.
Yeah, and Terez, you were one of the few guys who had Mahomes in a mock draft. I think you did 4 or 5 of them leading into that 2017 draft, and you had the Chiefs taking Mahomes. I think that's the only quarterback you had the Chiefs taking in one of your mock drafts, and I know you fell for him. I did too. I think one of the things that we didn't know is would the Chiefs be willing to trade up from they were at 27, I want to say, that year. Yeah. Would they be willing to trade up, and where would they have to go? And would it be Watson or Mahomes?
Yeah, I think looking back at it, like the reason, like I knew they were going to take a quarterback somewhere. Like just I'd heard too much. I'd understood like their mechanisms for like how they did things and like saw things kind of heading that way. So like I knew it was happening. I just didn't necessarily know which one. And I didn't know how far they'd be willing to trade up. And I think that was an internal discussion that probably went on to the last minute because there were people who wanted to go even higher than they did. Right. So, Mahomes, though, put it this way, you're right. Like I had him in my very first mock draft. I think I did 4 that year. And I think that came out in February. I also interviewed Mahomes at the Super Bowl. And I kind of had a hunch there. Like I had a sense. I interviewed him there. I really started watching tape of him. I think like that week, Sam, we were talking about him. I actually showed you like my scouting report of him or something. We were at that Super Bowl. I think we were at that Super Bowl and like we did a podcast afterward, like right after the Super Bowl, like that night, like talking about quarterbacks. And you'd watched Mahomes a little bit and I watched him too. And the thing I just realized was like, yeah, you were right. There was some goofy stuff on the tape. There was some throws that were like, man, like you're forcing it. But there's also the understanding that later it came that he had to make those throws because he was trying to keep his team in the game. And it's actually a remarkable thing. He didn't throw more interceptions, right? I think he finished that year with 10 or something while single-handedly making that team competitive. I think at the end of the day, we're going to look back at that draft and his college tape as what you need to be looking for. What you need to be looking for in a quarterback. Is he elevating his team? Yeah, he did. Is he making ridiculous throws that he shouldn't be able to make that deflate the other team? Yeah.
The stuff you don't like, is it fixable in the right place? Yes. Those are the three questions you're going to be asking yourself. And the people who got that Mahomes evaluation wrong, which was not me or Sam or any of us, we were high on him. The people who got that wrong, those are the questions they're asking themselves.
Yeah.
I found a story. I can't remember where I found it, but after the draft, somebody did a compilation of the mock drafts, the final mock drafts that everybody did. CBS Sports and SI and ESPN, they all do mock drafts, and they did a compilation of 104 mock drafts, final mock drafts. 20, I think it was 24 of them had the Chiefs taking a quarterback. 8 had him taking Mahomes. None of them had the Chiefs moving up to draft Mahomes. So going into the draft, at least the national perception was it was going, the Chiefs weren't going to move up to get a quarterback. And the national perception was Mahomes wasn't going to be taken in the first 12 or 13 picks. And then we get to the draft night, and the Chiefs move up to 10, and then Andy Reid and John Dorsey speak to the media, and I could not forget how giddy they seemed over the pick, we got someone, and we fooled some people. And Vahe, is that how you remember the feeling that night in the media room?
Yeah, and what's interesting about that now is, in hindsight, not just how Patrick has performed since then, but a lot of the ways some of this has gotten filled in terms of what was going on in those months before. Particularly a story we've all heard a few times in a few different ways. And I imagine that, again, Terez and Sam in particular had some ears to the ground on this in real time, but I think it's become amplified rather well in the last year or so, especially as the Chiefs rose to Super Bowl champions, where you get intimate kind of details about how Brett Veach was just absolutely almost annoying Andy Reid with how much he was going to him with Patrick Mahomes tape, and Andy kind of like, okay, kid, I saw it, and things like that. Now, some of this stuff maybe has gotten jazzed up in the storytelling since, but it's interesting knowing sort of more of what we know now about the groundswell and the intensity of their feeling about Patrick in that time, and how really they were pretty good at keeping a lid on it, probably right until that moment you were just describing, Blair.
Mm-hmm. I just love this line from Terez that we played in our Facebook Live when it was Vahe. You asked Terez, "What are you looking for in a quarterback?" And we were having a discussion. Alex Smith was coming back for that year. We didn't know what the future of Alex Smith was, and so Vahe, your question to Terez was, "What's your criteria? What are you looking for?" And Terez, your response was Pro Bowls. You want if you're going to draft a quarterback with the first round pick, you got to draft a Pro Bowl guy, and gunning for a top 5 quarterback, shooting for the moon. And your one of your reasonings was, if you do that, your job is safe. For whether you're coach or GM, your job is safe for a while. Yeah. We know that's not true with Dorsey, but there were.
but for Andy, it was true. For Brett, it was true. It worked out for those guys. We're at the point in the league where you still could kind of see it going this way then, where like the rules have been so relaxed. Like, your quarterback better be a guy. Like, we are totally past the point where you can have a game manager. Like, that just, even like game managers have to like really make throws in the playoffs for you to go anywhere. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. So, I wouldn't be shooting, aiming low here, because this is not 1999. You're aiming for a stud, because that's what's going to get you through if you nail that pick. The Chiefs did that, though. They that's the biggest key in this league now, man. If you can get that quarterback, and look, I'm glad cooler heads prevailed there. It's funny to think about now, but there were people in this organization that liked Nathan Peterman, but I never heard as much about like love about him as it was Mahomes. Like, that was completely like the Mahomes thing. the more I heard about him, I interviewed him myself, the more I liked. And then you turn on the tape and it's like, yeah, I see why they love this guy, which is why he was a mile juice quarterback. But yeah, like they went with the ceiling. And I think that kind of prescience has like a lot to do with the people in charge. It's Andy and his V. That's why it's important to have smart people and forward thinking people like running your football team, because, they were ahead of teams as far as being willing to take a shot on like a raw guy with the upside. Like the upside, as long as their mentality is good, is key. Like Jamarcus Russell had upside, but the mentality and work ethic and all that other stuff wasn't there. Like the Chiefs chose upside with Mahomes, but all his intangible stuff was through the roof. They brought him. Remember, guys, they brought him in for the workout, the pre-draft, and they put him on the board, and he blew those other guys away. Deshaun Watson, he blew all those guys away. And like that's the key, making sure that if you're going to draft upside and a raw guy, he's got all that too. So a lot of lessons, like a lot of teaching lessons from like how that has worked out. And I know teams have they have looked at themselves and like, how do we blow that? Okay. And you've seen like, that's why someone like Jordan Love might go higher than he otherwise would like 2 or 3 years ago, because that upside is important now.
That's interesting. I don't. There have been other quarterbacks that have come in and pretty early in their career after they were drafted and won a Super Bowl. Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger come to mind of recent guys, but
yeah,
I don't think anybody has come in and done. Obviously, nobody's come in and been the MVP in a second year and won a Super Bowl in the third year. So, I mean, I think we can maybe, at least right now, without having studied it, one of the great draft picks and great draft finds and great draft decisions of all time. Is that fair to say?
I definitely, yeah, right. Like I think we all kind of agree. Like there's going to be probably a 30 for 30 on how that all played out one day. And I guess the kind of cool thing is, not to kind of hog the ball here, but I think you guys would agree, right? Like the cool thing is that, I really do feel like for the most part, the organization was pretty united in loving this guy. And that was the one thing I was thinking of when you guys were talking about that draft day. Because like Dorsey was as happy as anybody that he maneuvered to get this guy, that he pulled off the trade and got to a spot he felt comfortable. Like he was almost bragging about it. He was really, really happy with himself for doing it. And it's important to remember that, he deserves credit for that, because he did make the trade to like make that happen. And a lot of people love the player and really push for the player, mainly Brett. But, it took kind of a team effort to make it happen, which is kind of cool to see too.
Yeah. One other, I keep thinking about this too. And Terez kind of just hit on this, but I just remember feeling with those three quarterbacks that Trubisky kind of did not belong,
Yeah,
and
right.
to me it was,
none of us liked him.
Yeah, it was these other two. And when I thought about them, one other weird factor, it's not just air raid, it's not just, all this other stuff, but I kept thinking about Patrick Mahomes was doing this against Big 12 defenses.
Yeah.
And Deshaun Watson, I just watched him do a 2-minute drill on Alabama in the national championship game. And I remember us talking about that. And it's just there's a million different factors that you have to weigh when you're making these decisions. But we did a podcast. I don't know if you remember this, Terez. We were up in that like attic or whatever at the office, and we finished. And I think I had mentioned that like I hadn't seen the Gruden thing, the Gruden QB camp. And you're like, you got to watch Watson's and you got to watch Mahomes, and then tell me what you think. And because at that point, now you see the brain.
Right. I remember that helped sway me too. Yeah.
Yeah. That was sort of a different, it was just like, oh my God, like, he's not just this freakish unicorn talent, but now he's got a brain to go with it. Like, holy cow, like this guy has the potential to be different. And there's another, I think we all know this, right? And we talked about it at the time, but there's such an Andy Reid factor going on in this, like one of the all-time, unknowables, but I'll always kind of think about it is what would have happened if the Chiefs fell in love with Deshaun Watson and took him. And you just switched. They're both terrific players. I think they both succeeded matter what. But, that is an advantage. And not just Andy, but, Tyreek and Travis Kelce, like all this other stuff too.
No, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Don't we think it's interesting, though, like, it says how badass that Watson is, that he was the quarterback of the team that blew that 24-point lead in Arrowhead, and like no one blames him for it, like at all.
Right.
Like, none of us are just like, oh, Deshaun really blew it. Like, it's like, no, Bill O'Brien sucks. Like, that's what people say, which is really fascinating. And like, I think that's what makes the Bears' failure like pretty egregious, right? Like, we're all just like, guys, we knew that. I mean, Watson is defensible at number 4 or number 2 or 1 or whatever, or 3, whatever. There was no scenario where any of us thought that Trubisky should have gone where he did or was better than Watson. I just never saw it.
No question. Yeah.
All right, guys, I've kept you too long, and but just a warning: we'll reconvene at some point to relive the Terez Paylor, Sam Mellinger moment in the Broncos press box.
A moment that will never die.
After the social distancing guidelines are dropped, if we're going to do that right.
That's right. Since you're on the floor next to each other in the press box.
What's funny though? Like, I'm glad it's kind of taken on mythical proportions, because, like, in a way, that's the moment when honestly, that's the moment when, like, I think we both knew, like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Like, that's when you knew something was special. Like, that day against that team, that was still a very spunky Bronco defense too. He shouldn't have been doing what he was doing. It was completely outrageous to see a player wearing Chiefs colors doing that to them. That's
so well said. Yeah, that he was wearing that uniform. Like, that's the uniform of the game manager. Has been for decades.
Well, believe me, if a Lions quarterback ever did it, it'd be the same. It'd be the exact same. I might not even survive it.
Well, that was also the first kind of visual proof of what we'd been hearing all season long about what this guy was doing in practice, right? From Eric Berry, from Marcus Peters, from everybody who was seeing Patrick Mahomes in practice, that throw at Denver and some of the other throws that he made that day were like, this is what they're talking about.
Yeah, and just real quick, that throw to Demarcus Robinson on the sideline is just, that's a forever throw.
It's an outrageous throw.
Was his first completion that laser to?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, like on third and long, right?
That was crazy. Like, just a warm up throw. Like, I haven't seen a quarterback do that.
It was a misser. I'm pretty sure it was that throw that prompted me to add the John Madden after like half of the throws he made in that game. Just the moment he releases it. Yeah, like he was dealing. Like, Mahomes was dealing that day. It was. Oh, you know what else I remember too? Andy Reid being as glowing as possible without like losing it. Like, he is so controlled in those pressers, but he was just like, look, the kid had complete control. Okay, total, complete, absolute control. Okay, and it's just like, whoa. Because Andy never said that about anybody.
Yeah. You could almost, in that post game, it was almost like there was 2 little Andys on his shoulder, and one was just giddy as anybody could ever be. And it's like, holy crap, did you see this? That's our quarterback now. And the other guy was like, slow your roll. Slow your roll. Playoffs. We got a playoff game. Just, calm down. And it was just like he was tied between these two little Andys. Like, one was like he would have been in the dog pile with us in the press box, and the other just like this old school football, never be impressed kind of guy. It was great.
It was an unbelievable moment.
Well, I know when we start talking over each other, it's probably time to to get out of here. Sam, Vahe, Terez, it was great catching up with you, and let's not wait so long to do it again.
Absolutely.
That'll do it for today. Shout out to our production team of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. Randy always seems to draw the multi-audio assignments. Thanks, Randy. A cap tip to Terez Paylor, Vahe, Gregorian, and Sam Mellinger for their appearance on today's show. And go catch Sam's podcast, Mellinger Minutes for the Ears, which dropped today. Hey, we're done for the week, and we thank you for listening and hope you enjoyed it. Your support for our products has never been more important. You heard about our Sports Pass subscription. That's a good deal. So is the entire Kansas City Star digital product. It's all of our news, sports, business, and features coverage, plus an e-edition of the Star. You get a copy of how the Star appears in print on your phone, laptop, or desktop, plus there's additional national coverage there. Go to account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. Hey, and speaking of digital, we got something special planned for NFL Draft Night. You won't want to miss it, and I'll fill you in on the details next week, but it involves several NFL markets in our draft coverage. So we'll be back on Monday on SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.